Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you our Day 2 keynote speaker. As the Managing Director for IDC ASEAN, Sudev directs the overall operations of the ASEAN country offices and works alongside local and global organizations, C-level executives in their aspirations in developing robust plans and strategies in the emerging countries. Sudev is also a frequent speaker at industry events across Southeast Asia on a wide range of topics. In this keynote, Sudev will share with us insight on how the shift in IT spending prioritization is a natural progression, and how keeping your house in order is the hallmark of what will help your organization emerge resilient post-pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, Sudev Bangah.
Right. So, thank you, Myra. Appreciate the introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. And it's always exciting to do presentations in this platform. And a lot of us now actually get to feel how a host or a presenter actually feels within a studio. We're so used to interacting to everyone on a face-to-face basis. I do miss interacting with all of you, but it is exciting that we're still able to get out some messaging and some content during this period. And I'm sure you're going overload as well with the amount of content on the internet around digital transformation, as well as how you should be reacting to the pandemic. But today, I truly hope that some of the takeaways you get from my presentation will be around some strategies you should be putting in place over the next 3 to 6 months in the near term, a little bit more in the near term rather than the long term, because I won't lie about it. If somebody is talking to you about 24 months down the line, it's probably a picture that not many of us actually know at this point in time. It's not something that we are able to note. It's not something that a lot of analysts are able to forecast at this point in time. But what we've been doing in IDC, we've been trending and looking at the market for the past, every 2 weeks, in fact. We started to get out there. We started to take a pulse of the market and try to understand what technology buyers such as yourselves have been reacting to the market. And today I hope to share some of those trends and, of course, very key strategies of which you can take away and utilize within your organization. And most importantly, I guess one point before I get into the presentation is to say everybody is looking for stability. There's a little analogy in music where a lot of people, whether they play the guitar, whether they play piano, whether they play classical music, I love to give this analogy, is around resolution. And resolution is about bringing a lyrical note to conclusion in a point of stability. And that is what we see a lot of organizations at this point in time are looking for. So we start with the journey. And the journey to recovery, as we see at this point in time, has essentially started off from April-May period that we've seen in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, as well as in Malaysia. And this recovery process is something of a work in progress for a lot of organizations in Malaysia at this point in time. And I guess what is important for us to note, in IDC, again, what we've been doing is that we've been taking a pulse of the market every couple of weeks. And the information you're staring at is as of mid-July. We will be getting our end July data very soon. But I wanted to start with a little bit of a picture around the COVID-19 technology index of which we have. Now, the COVID-19 technology index takes a pulse of organizations across continents, across different areas, whether it's United States, Europe, USA, Asia Pacific, as well as worldwide, to see the confidence technology buyers have in spending all over again. If you look at this chart and you can see a little bit of the trend from April all across to mid-July, you saw a little bit of an uptick in May because of the recovery of the pandemic cases that we saw across in China, Korea, and Japan. Singapore as well during that period was recovering very well before a second wave hit. Malaysia at this point in time, as you know, we've been keeping things very stable. And Southeast Asia in general, with the exception of Indonesia and the Philippines, have been very stable in terms of the number of infection cases or the rate of infections. And because of that, that has brought in a little bit more confidence from the tech buyer side in wanting to start to reinvest. Now, I think what is really important here around reinvestment is that digital transformation discussions have not gone away. I think that's a very important thing to note. Digital transformation, in fact, has accelerated from our data, from the discussions we've had with you, with the technology buyers, with everyone who's been impacted by this pandemic, we understand right now that digital transformation initiatives have to be accelerated because many organizations was caught out, or they were caught out somewhere in the March-April period. And a lot of review around business continuity, around resiliency, around cost optimization have now become the top of mind. But let's revisit a little bit in terms of what the ASEAN CEO priorities have been over the past few months running up to the pandemic. Now, this is in no particular order. However, these 4 elements around critical infrastructure, ensuring there's infrastructure modernization, ensuring that your platform has stability, elasticity, as well as able to support a lot of the new technologies on top of it, that has been a very important key point, especially driving towards business goals. And when it comes to your customers, re-engaging customers have always been a difficulty for many organizations over the past 1 to 2 years, especially with the change transition these customers have been going through in order to adopt or to consume your services. So the acquisition or addressing new customer requirements have been a top CEO priority as well. Capabilities, keeping up with the new technologies coming in, keeping up with the new trends coming in. It's important for organizations to be able to refresh their capabilities, to retrain, to reskill, to acquire new capabilities to support the organization into the future, as well as an industry ecosystem. Looking at the vertical or the sector that you're in, understanding your key partners, your supply chain, understanding how that has changed, and trying to define your role within this so-called digital economy is very, very pertinent at this point. So these have been the ASEAN CEO priorities. And at this point in time, these priorities have not changed, they just might have reshuffled. And when we talk about the data that we have received in May, you talk about technology-led priorities for 2020 and 2021, we're seeing an emergence of data-related solutions and technologies coming to the fore. There's a lot of discussion around organizations wanting to be a so-called future enterprise at this point in time. But what does that truly take? What does a future enterprise truly entail? Now, from our definition, where we stare at a future enterprise, is an organization who's able to take steps and make decisions based off intelligent data. How do you get that intelligent data? The process behind it and the technology and the solutions to derive this intelligent data is going to be extremely important. So we've seen this very quickly move up the ranks in terms of wanting to be a future enterprise, a data-driven organization, and ultimately to culminate this around the infrastructure that is going to drive towards the business goals. Now, the future enterprise is aspirational. At this point in time, we do not anticipate or do not feel that many organizations are at that point at this point in time. It's a little bit of a journey. It's a continuous journey. And as we move forward and we start looking at the different technologies that are being adopted, the key point here is to be very focused on the technology investments or the technology implementation or digital transformation project initiatives that are going to help drive towards those business goals. I cannot say that often enough around business goals. Over the past couple of years, you've seen KPIs come up which are not in sync with technology development or technology deployment within the organization. So as CEO priorities continue to be around business, they have started to look towards technology to enable them so that they can move towards what is called a future enterprise. Now, let me localize this a little bit across to Malaysian organizations. Now, if you look at C-level priorities, the top 3 priorities pre-COVID and post-COVID, we've seen a little bit of a shift in terms of what they're looking for. And if you remember the 2 terms I brought up just now around resiliency and cost optimization, those are the 2 areas of keen focus of Malaysian organizations right now. If you're a Malaysian enterprise tuning in right now and you're looking at this slide going, that's exactly what I'm doing, you are not wrong and you are not alone. And most importantly, you are not alone. And if you see towards the other end of the other side of the slide, when you talk about cloud services, analytics, AI, IoT, cybersecurity, even robotics or automation, I think the important point to note, while we see optimism from Malaysian enterprises wanting to move towards these services, move towards these technology implementation, and the reinvestment going to be a little bit more targeted, the building of their future-proof business as well as the assessment of the technology that's going to help you is a very, very critical point for you. Let me elaborate. Now, if you were to walk in tomorrow and have discussions with your board or those who will fund your technology projects, the important point to note around here is that you cannot just pick and choose a technology that you think is going to help you. Now, we've seen very siloed implementation of technology that unfortunately hinders the process of digital transformation rather than help it. So when you holistically look at your technology implementation or digital transformation, it's very critical for you to reassess your organization at this point in time. You need to take stock. If you're unable to take stock at this point in time, we see a trend from a global basis down to a regional basis where change consulting or business consulting is very critical at this point for organizations who are pivoting, especially in view of the pandemic at this point in time. So if you go in tomorrow and decide IoT is the poster child, one of the poster childs of technology, poster childs of saving organizations from the pandemic, unfortunately, that isn't the case. Now, the culmination of these as a solution and underpinning all of these with your business values and your business goals is going to be extremely important over the next 3 to 6 months. Therefore, helping you to retarget and refocus a lot of your investments towards the fourth quarter of the year as well as the first quarter of 2021. Now, these are some of the discussions that we've had, and if you look across the spectrum, these are actual quotes that we've received from CIOs across ASEAN as well as Malaysia. And if you're sitting right there and saying, hey, that's exactly something that I've said before, that's because your colleagues are saying the same thing. If you look towards the left, when the crisis hit, there was a bit of a slowdown. Everybody was saying we need to be in sync with our CEO. We need to manage our infrastructure to support our employees out into a virtual environment. How do we do that? If you look to the extreme other side, towards the right, you're going to see that business resiliency, cost optimization, while that is top of mind, I have to be able to then look at the processes within my organization, have my house in order for me to actually drive towards that. So that review of it is going to be extremely critical. Now, in Malaysia, majority of the organizations we have spoken to, they're square in the middle. The two quotes that you see in the middle right there. Business has to re-begin. It has to restart. We have no choice around it. We need to be safe. We have to be prepared for what is called the new normal or the next normal. I know that's a term that's come up very often right now, but unfortunately it's going to be said quite a bit. But the so-called new normal or the next normal in terms of how businesses are going to operate in these times. How do we then prioritize technologies? How are we able to choose things, especially if organizations are re-looking their structure? And there might be layoffs, there might be furloughs, there might be organizations who are trying to cut costs in a more traditional way. How do we prioritize the business? So in the next section of my slide deck, which you'll see across, will be some of the strategies for you to consider in moving ahead with your organization's plans in the coming future. So start with the end in mind. I think what's really critical, if you look towards the journey, if you look across the spectrum from business continuity all the way to being a future enterprise, if you take a stare at that and you see how this has gone across in terms of the curve, you can see the ultimate goal again of a future enterprise is an information-enabled organization. It's an organization which is data-driven. It's an organization based on the ideals of utilizing analytics to succeed. Now, if you look towards cost optimization and business resiliency, and that's where we see majority of Malaysian organizations right now, we see cloud solutions, we see tools which are going to help in terms of forecasting and optimization, solutions that are perhaps going to help you from a certain point of view to review internally to see, hey, have I been missing something? Can I cost save 10% or 20% somewhere else? So while you are in this mode right now and executing on this mode around cost optimization and business resiliency, it is very critical now to think about the 6 months ahead to see where targeted investments potentially can be and what these targeted investments have to actually materialize in order for your business to continue. So this brings us to the point about how you should reintegrate with your partners. Now, your partners being your partner ecosystem, whether it's a supply chain, whether it's the organizations you're used to working to within your sector, but most importantly, the service providers that you work with, the vendors, the technology providers that you work with. Now, bringing this to a fore, again, word of the year for me is business resiliency. Now, we hear things around pandemic being a very, one of the most searched words across in Google. We hear, again, new normal or next normal being one of the most searched words as well on search engines. But for me, it's been business resiliency. And business resiliency has to be broken down into pillars for you in order for you to define that out very clearly for your organization to practice. Now, it's very easy for us to go in and say that we need to be a resilient business. But what does that truly entail? What does that truly mean? Now, breaking this out for you, I hope you get a little bit of a picture. Now, analysis, the ability to synthesize information, looking at the information within your organization and outside, then being able to react to it is very, very critical. So how is your infrastructure at this moment in time able to help pull that through and to help you to analyze whatever is out there for your business to react? So you can see the technology focus on the slide over there, whether it's self-service analytics, whether it's remote learning, whether it's crisis analytics, risk analytics. These are some areas for you to think about. Now, adaptability, the ability to learn. What can we learn from this? What can we learn from the data that we have? What are the relationships between the information that we've gathered based on what we know and how we usually react to a situation, and how can we change that reaction? And this cuts across anything from internal business focus, your operations, and all the way out also towards your customer and re-engaging with your customer. When you talk to your customer, they're going to have a very different reaction. Now, I saw a really good quote and a very good data around the manner of which you react to the pandemic is how your customers are going to react to you. It's how they are going to see you. If you react in a very confident manner, they will be more confident in dealing with you and working with you. So in terms of the ability to learn, ability to re-engage, that is a critical element. And finally, around agility. Again, talking about infrastructure which is agile, scalable, stable, and able to then provide the digital services out to your organization, internal stakeholders or internal employees, as well as then towards your customers. This is an element for you to think about. But again, this is something very easy to speak about. When you walk in, you talk about business resiliency, it's very, very easy to speak about that. So this is where we come in with the term, you need to make sure your house is in order. If you want to deliver out reliable digital services and experiences, if you want to ensure that the experience that your organization internally and your customers externally are feeling, it is very critical for you to revise and review your platform to see whether it can be enabled by these technology solutions. So whether it's now starting to look towards a shift towards cloud-based platforms around business support functions. And going back to that note, again, when the pandemic struck, when we went out and we started to talk to a lot of these organizations, we realized very simplistic business support functions there was an inability to execute on these very simplistic business support functions. Procurement, for example, administration, legal. They were finance to a certain extent. They were unable to do this because a lot of organizations, unfortunately, did not have that platform for them to be able to continue their business immediately when a lockdown is announced just 2 days before you are actually supposed to lock down. So how do you react to this? We also saw organizations who are unable to support their employees outside because they did not have company provision devices, and those employees were unable to hook up to secure networks to be able to access company or organization related resources, and therefore that became a problem. Now, automation, secure infrastructure is going to be extremely critical for you, as well as embracing smart things. Now, it's a really good time for you to review your organization from the ground up to say that, listen, what can we automate? What can we ensure that we can do in order for us to continue business if we hit a wave 2 or a wave 3? Is my business going to be prepared to actually stave off such a wave? Am I going to be able to continue? So getting your house in order right now, looking at your infrastructure, is an extremely critical point. And the CIOs of the day of what we see right now, especially for the CIOs who have actually tuned in at this moment, it's important for you to be self-motivated to want to do this. Now, our prediction, around this is that, and it's not to say that CIOs at the moment are not self-motivated in terms of wanting to take the first step or to take the initiative to want to deploy digital transformation projects or initiatives within the organization. But that empowerment coming from the CEO should help CIOs or IT heads or functional VPs of around technology to be able to then take the step forward to say, we have taken a review of the organization, and I think this is what's going to be really important for us to achieve the business goals that you want, Mr. CEO or Board of Directors. So that proactive approach, driving change, being able to build resiliency, being able to build the skill sets, the capabilities, and be able to deliver things in real time. This is going to, these are the elements that's going to help and aid an organization tomorrow. And building partner networks to fill in gaps in skills and competencies. Do know that you don't always have to acquire all the skill sets here. I mean, you don't have to train the skill sets yourself. You don't have to hire in. It's very important for you to look at the partner ecosystem that you have and see how you can leverage off that to ensure that you are able to then operate without heightening costs, overly heightening costs within your organization. So these are the 4 steps that we feel is important to take. Now, these are not in linear format, and it's important for you to take stock of them right now. First of all, around getting your house in order, an autonomous elastic infrastructure, steering your infrastructure and making sure it can scale with the new technologies that can be that you would like to implement at this point in time for your business goals. Trust, building a credible network of partners, whether it's from a supply side or whether it's from a technology service provider point of view, is going to be very important for you to build that trusted network so you can leverage off these expertise in the future. Resourcing, creatively managing your resources. Again, upskilling, reskilling the resources you have and borrowing in the resources that you don't have rather than trying to hunt and search for them all the time. And of course, then re-evaluating your position within the ecosystem of your industry. The industries are evolving. The line between industries are extremely blurred at this point in time. Telcos can actually be finance companies become insurance companies, etc. There's so many of iterations of that. But the impact around the ecosystem, the evolution of the industries is important to take stock of where you are right now and see how you can evolve with that as well post-pandemic. So as we move towards the next 6 months, I think it's really critical for organizations to be able to reintegrate with their partners and consider a form of change consulting or business consulting as well. Now, business consulting for me has been something which is, I have truly found personally when I've had discussions with CEOs or CIOs and around change consulting as well, I have truly found it to be extremely beneficial for a lot of organizations when it's come to the point of them trying to plan, especially a short-term manner of how they should react to a crisis. I've seen a lot of use cases or case studies that have popped up where with this change consulting or even business consulting, the suite of solutions to help business goals have resonated really well with the KPIs of the business side of the organization. So if you're moving towards business resiliency, if you need to look at the suite of solutions or technology solutions which are going to help your organization, I would recommend that a step forward for you to reintegrate with your partners is to talk to them around an element of business consulting. Ask them for their advice. Asking the right questions is going to be extremely key at this point in time because we do understand cost is a consideration. Our data across the line shows that cost is truly a consideration and that has been noted. As cost is a consideration, you almost have to get this correct at a go, at one time. It's almost a one-time thing. But moving away from the dreaded word ROI, which is monetary value, I think what's going to be critical for a lot of organizations is to look at the different value outside of monetary return of a digital transformation initiative, of a now so-called post-pandemic targeted investment initiative that is going to be extremely critical when it comes to your technology spending. So ask the right questions, continue your investments to close the gaps in your digital transformation that you had before, build your trusted partner network, and ultimately then hopefully this will be able to drive you towards your goals of staving off the economic impact that your organization has had over the past 6 months due to the pandemic. So with that, I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate viewing. There's probably some questions going on. I'm going to hang around to answer a few questions before I go off. But I wish you all the best in the future for those who are not asking questions. But I'll turn it to the question time right now.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for that amazing blueprint of how you make a decision for a CEO.
Yes, ma'am.
We do have, I think, 3 questions. And the first one is a question that I have. I think you have a lot of experience when it comes to ASEAN companies and CEOs. During this trying time, what is something that possibly Malaysian CEOs could learn from the ASEAN ecosystem to help raise themselves through this crisis? One particular thing that you think we should focus on?
Sure. I think very quickly, how you react to the pandemic again, or how you react to the situation is going to be very critical, and it's going to be very important. And I saw this about 5 years ago when organizations across Southeast Asia were almost blindly deploying different forms of technology and solutions within the organization, and we saw copycats occurring out in, whether it's in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, or Philippines, or whichever. And organizations tend to follow a trend. And I think it's very critical at this point in time for CEOs not to, interact too much with, not to say not interact, but for them not to copy a solution that perhaps worked for an organization. It may not necessarily work for their organization. It's going to be very important for them to, again, take stock of their focus and their business goals in order to then implement the right solutions for themselves. So try not to be, unfortunately, I don't have a better word, but the copycat trend was very prominent over the past 5 years. Oh, somebody did AI, somebody did robotics, therefore I'm going to go into it. It does not necessarily work that way.
Thank you. You mentioned that earlier as well. So I guess there are good solutions, but they might not be necessarily good solutions to your problems as a business. Thank you. So we have 2 more questions. First one is from Tasha. And the question is, what technology apart from cloud technology can an organization use to build for business resiliency?
It's a great question. Thank you, Tasha. So, cloud technology is essentially what we call very foundational technology for organizations to depend upon when it comes to so-called resiliency. Now, again, defining business resiliency, you're going to look at the different areas of moving towards a data-driven organization or an information-based organization to react to certain, to the market. And cloud technologies at this point in time is something of which our cloud platforms at this point in time, when it goes down to business continuity, whether it goes down to your storage, compute, I think that is going to be a fundamental point for your organization to be able to react to. But when we talk about business resiliency, let's go back to the business support functions. Now, a lot of organizations, again, were unable to get simplistic procurement done. They were unable to get simplistic legal documents done as well. I remember when the pandemic hit in late March and the lockdown happened, we were dealing with a few customers who had to send contracts all around to get a wet signature. So we literally had to send it to different home addresses, even out of state, to get a wet signature to send it back. And all this can actually be built and supported by systems that can actually aid towards business resiliency. So then you don't lose time to market. So whether it's staring at very simplistic ERP systems for your organization, looking towards collaboration tools, these are the technology. And again, a lot, whether it's based on cloud, whether it's based in your data center, obviously for us, we feel a more elastic environment, especially towards cloud technology, is going to be a very, very important key KPI for the IT department to drive and implement and infuse within the business in the coming 6 months.
Thank you for that answer. I think a lot of the times what we hear here is like AI technology, but to use the simple example of signatures during the pandemic for ongoing partnerships, I think that's powerful. Sometimes it's the simple things that can help you progress or your business progress and be more efficient.
Correct.
Okay, so we have one more question. It's from Sabrina. big companies seem to prefer global brands instead of smaller
Right.
local players. How do local tech companies overcome this stigma? Very good question.
I like this question a lot. I'm just wondering whether it's the Sabrina I know who would ask this. Not sure where she's from, but hello, Sabrina. So this stigma is very much born from, well, stigma perhaps is a strong word, but it is born from the point of view that in the development of a lot of local SIs in Malaysia, that wide-scale partnership towards global brands have always been extremely prominent. Now, I would certainly say at this point in time, this is not a knock on any local vendor or local tech company at this point in time. But a lot of the technologies were pioneered outside before they were brought in. Where local companies or local technology companies truly stand out is the differentiator around whether you call it a cultural affinity, as well as in terms of how a local provider can feed into very specific industries that global brands cannot. And therefore, then the global brands will want to partner with you to get into those opportunities as well. So I don't have the silver bullet answer for you right now or a golden ticket, unfortunately, but that preference it is born out of the idea or the fact that a lot of the new technologies come from outside and local providers tend to take that as part of their partners to deliver that out. But I do feel the local providers have that huge opportunity to play into very niche areas of which global brands cannot. And in fact, then the narrative will be a little bit more flipped, where the global brands will want to partner with you to get into very specific opportunities in Malaysia.
Thank you so much. So find your
you.
niche area and then monetize it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the amazing speech as well as really, really good questions from the audience. I will be joining you later in the main area, but before that, just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'll see you guys later.